They say wisdom is a gift, a light that guides you through life's complexities, a crown earned through experience and reflection. But what if that light never stops searching? What if the ability to see through almost everything, the facades, the unspoken motives, the fragile performances people mistake for connection, becomes less of a gift and more of a lonely vigil? There are people who walk through the world reading between every line. They notice the tremor in a voice that doesn't match the smile. They sense the hollow flattery, the social script playing on repeat. They see the inconsistencies others overlook, the truths hidden beneath polished surfaces. And while the world celebrates clarity and insight, no one talks about the quiet isolation that comes with it. What happens when you see too much? When pattern recognition becomes a lens you can't remove? When the ability to perceive truth leaves you standing outside the very connections you long for? This is the psychology of those who see through almost everything. Let's begin. You've always noticed things others don't. The way someone's enthusiasm doesn't quite reach their eyes. The rehearsed quality of a compliment that sounds warm but feels hollow. The slight hesitation before agreement. That microscopic pause that reveals doubt dressed as consent. While others accept the surface, you're already 3 layers down, reading the subtext like a language you never chose to learn but can't unlearn. At first, it felt like power, like you'd been given a secret map to navigate the world, a decoder ring for human behavior. You could predict outcomes, sense danger, protect yourself from disappointment. You knew when someone was lying before they finished their sentence. You felt the shift in a room's energy while others remained oblivious. But somewhere along the way, the power began to feel more like a sentence. Because clarity doesn't just illuminate, it separates. When you see through the performance, you're no longer part of the audience. When you recognize the script, you can't pretend it's spontaneous. When you notice the carefully constructed facade, you stand outside the shared illusion that others call connection. You watch people bond over conversations you know are surface level. You see friendships built on mutual avoidance of depth. You witness the elaborate dance of social niceties, the performance of interest, the choreography of small talk, the agreed upon pretense that no one acknowledges, and you wonder, am I the only one who sees this? The truth is, you're not cynical. You don't want to see through everything. There's no satisfaction in dismantling someone's carefully built presentation. No joy in recognizing the patterns that others miss. You would give anything to experience the world the way they do, to take things at face value, to believe the smile without analyzing its authenticity, to participate in the social fabric without constantly feeling the loose threads. But your mind won't let you rest there. It searches, analyzes, cross-references every word against every gesture, every promise against past behavior. It builds invisible files on inconsistencies. It notices what's unsaid more than what's spoken. And the most exhausting part, you can't turn it off. This isn't a skill you practice or a lens you choose to apply. It's the only way you know how to see. Like someone who suddenly gained the ability to see infrared or hear frequencies others can't. The awareness is constant, involuntary, inescapable. So you stand in crowded rooms feeling entirely alone. You participate in conversations while observing them from a distance. You long for connection while your perception builds walls you never asked for. This is the curse of clarity, understanding everything except how to stop understanding. This ability didn't arrive as a gift wrapped in clarity and insight. It came as survival. Long before you had words for what you were doing, you were learning to read the room. Not for curiosity, for safety, not for understanding, for prediction. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where emotional weather changed without warning, where a parent's mood determined the atmosphere of the entire house, and you learned to detect the shift before the storm arrived. You became fluent in micro expressions, in the tension behind a closed door, in the specific quality of silence that meant danger. Or maybe the inconsistency was subtler. Words said one thing while body language whispered another. "I'm fine," delivered with clenched fists. "I love you," spoken with distant eyes. You learned early that surface and depth didn't always align, that survival meant trusting what you observed over what you were told. Some children grow up with the luxury of taking people at their word. You grew up cross-referencing every statement against a database of past behaviors, building prediction models in a mind too young to know that's what it was doing. This is where hyperperceptiveness is born, not in intelligence or sensitivity alone, but in necessity. Your nervous system learned to stay alert, scanning for inconsistencies the way others scan for threats. Your brain developed pattern recognition as armor. You became a translator of unspoken languages because the spoken ones couldn't be trusted. And it worked. It kept you safe. It helped you navigate chaos. It gave you advance warning when others would have been blindsided. But the mind doesn't forget what it learned to survive. Even when the danger passes, the vigilance remains. Even when you're no longer in that childhood home, that unpredictable environment, that space where reading between the lines meant the difference between peace and pain, your perception still operates at that heightened frequency. The radar doesn't shut off just because the storm has moved on. You carry this skill into adulthood, into relationships where people mean what they say, into friendships that don't require constant monitoring, into spaces that are actually safe. But your mind still searches for the hidden meaning, still braces for the contradiction, still reads every gesture as potential evidence. Because once you've learned that words and truth can live in different places, you can't simply choose to believe the words again. This wasn't a superpower you developed for advantage. It was an adaptation you built for survival, a necessary evolution in an environment where being naive meant being hurt, where trust without verification was dangerous, where seeing clearly was the only way to protect the fragile, watchful child you were. You learned to see through everything because once, not seeing cost too much. Your brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It's designed to find connections, predict outcomes, create maps from chaos. This is how humans survive, by learning that fire burns, that certain sounds mean danger, that specific behaviors predict specific results. But some brains take this function and amplify it beyond normal frequency. When your early environment required constant vigilance, your neural pathways carved deep grooves in the landscape of attention. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, learned to stay partially activated, always scanning, always ready. Your prefrontal cortex developed an accelerated processing speed for social and emotional data, cross-referencing new information against vast archives of past experiences. This is hypervigilance at the neurological level, and once these pathways are established, they don't simply disappear when the threat does. They become your default operating system, the automatic filter through which all experience passes. You're not choosing to analyze. You're not deciding to look deeper. Your brain is doing what it was trained to do, running programs written in childhood, executing protocols designed for a different reality. This is why it feels so exhausting. Pattern recognition at this intensity requires tremendous cognitive energy. While others process conversations at surface level, your mind is running multiple simultaneous analyses: verbal content, tonal quality, body language, historical consistency, contextual alignment. You're comparing what's being said now against what was said before, measuring current behavior against past patterns, calculating probability of truth versus performance. It's like having dozens of browser tabs open in your consciousness at all times, each one cross-referencing data, each one searching for the pattern that explains the discrepancy. And the cruelest part? The more patterns you recognize, the more patterns you see. Your brain builds a library of human behavior, the way people deflect when hiding something, the specific cadence of manufactured enthusiasm, the micro expressions that leak through carefully maintained masks. Each new observation adds to the database. Each confirmed pattern reinforces the system. You become fluent in a language of inconsistency that most people never notice exists. But this fluency comes at a cost, because pattern recognition, when operating at survival level intensity, doesn't distinguish between actual threat and benign interaction. It treats every conversation as potential danger. It analyzes the harmless comment with the same scrutiny as the suspicious one. It can't differentiate between situations that require vigilance and situations that are simply safe. This is the prison. Not that you see patterns, but that you can't stop seeing them. Not that you're perceptive, but that perception has become compulsive. Not that you understand people deeply, but that you're trapped in a perpetual state of analysis that won't let you simply experience them. Your mind, trained for survival, now applies survival-level processing to a life that no longer requires it, and you don't know how to tell it the danger has passed. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being correct about things no one else wants to acknowledge. You see the fault lines in a friendship before it fractures. You recognize when someone is slowly pulling away while still smiling and making plans. You know the relationship is ending months before the conversation happens. And you're right. Almost always, you're right. But being right doesn't make you feel connected. It makes you feel like a ghost at your own life, present but unseen, watching a play where everyone else believes the performance is real. You sit in conversations where people discuss someone's intentions, debating meanings and motivations, constructing elaborate explanations for behavior that seems perfectly clear to you. And you stay quiet because you've learned that offering your perception doesn't bring people closer to truth. It brings them closer to defensiveness. They don't want to know that their new friend is performing interest rather than feeling it. They don't want to hear that the colleague's compliment was strategic, not sincere. They don't want their hopeful interpretation challenged by your pattern based prediction. So you hold the knowledge alone. You become a repository of truths that have nowhere to go, observations that would break the comfortable illusions others need to maintain. You carry the weight of seeing what people can't or won't see about themselves, about others, about the gap between what they claim and what they reveal. And the cruelest irony, you crave authenticity more than anything. You long for conversations without performance, for connections without hidden agendas, for relationships built on truth rather than convenience. You want someone to show up without the mask, to speak without the script, to exist without the careful curation. But your ability to detect inauthenticity has made you hyper aware of your own. You monitor yourself with the same scrutiny you apply to others. You question whether your smile is genuine or automatic, whether your enthusiasm is real or performed, whether you're being yourself or playing the role of someone easier to be around. The very thing you seek, raw, unfiltered authenticity, becomes impossible because you're too aware of construction itself. You can't simply be, you're always watching yourself being. And when you do meet someone who feels real, someone whose words and energy align, someone who doesn't seem to be performing, you're almost suspicious of it. Your pattern recognition whispers, "This is too good, too aligned, too consistent. What am I missing?" Even authenticity gets filtered through the lens of doubt. So you stand in the middle of your life, surrounded by people, engaged in relationships, participating in the social world, and you feel profoundly, achingly alone, not because no one is there, but because no one sees what you see, and you can't unsee it to join them. Every day you face the same impossible choice. Do you say what you see, or do you stay silent to keep the peace? This is the constant negotiation of your existence, the exhausting calculation between honesty and harmony, between protecting your truth and protecting your place in the room. You notice your friend is being manipulated by someone they're dating. You see the patterns, the subtle guilt trips, the inconsistent affection, the way promises evaporate when challenged. Do you speak? Do you point out what's so obvious to you but invisible to them? If you stay silent, you betray your own clarity. You watch someone you care about walk toward pain you could have warned them about. You become complicit in the illusion through your silence. But if you speak, you risk everything, because people don't thank you for breaking their comfortable narratives. They don't appreciate having their hopeful interpretations replaced with your pattern-based predictions. They don't want to be told they're not seeing clearly. It implies they're naive, foolish, blind. And so they defend, they explain, they find reasons why you're wrong, why this time is different, why your perception is too cynical, too negative, too much. You've learned this pattern too. The pattern of being right but unwelcome. The pattern of offering truth and receiving distance, the pattern of watching your honesty create exactly the isolation you were hoping to bridge. So you calibrate constantly. You learn to soften your observations, to phrase certainties as possibilities, to present your clear sight as mere opinion. You develop 1,000 ways to say, I see this, without actually saying it. You hint instead of state. You question instead of declare. You create plausible deniability for your own perception. It's exhausting because you're not just managing the truth, you're managing everyone's comfort with the truth. You're doing the emotional math of how much honesty this relationship can hold, how much reality this person can handle, how much of yourself you can show before it becomes too much. And the saddest part, even when you choose silence, even when you bite back what you know, even when you perform ignorance to preserve connection, you still feel the distance because you know you're editing yourself. You know you're hiding your true perception. You know the connection you're protecting is built on your willingness to pretend you see less than you do. Belonging, you've discovered, often requires making yourself smaller. And truth, you've learned, often requires standing alone. So you oscillate between the two, never fully choosing either, never fully at peace with the compromise, wondering if there's a place in this world where you can be both seen and honest, both connected and true. And then sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly, something shifts. You're analyzing someone's behavior, cataloging inconsistencies, noting patterns, building your case for what's really happening beneath their words. You've done this 1,000 times. You know the formula. You know how to decode. But this time, a different question arrives. What if they're not hiding something from me? What if they're hiding something from themselves? This is the moment everything changes, because suddenly your perception moves from exposure to compassion, from seeing through to seeing into, from judgment to understanding. You realize that the colleague who performs confidence is terrified of being discovered as inadequate, that the friend who deflects with humor is protecting a wound too tender to touch, that the family member who speaks in contradictions is trying to hold together a self-image that doesn't match their inner experience. They're not lying to deceive you. They're lying to survive themselves. And your hyperperceptiveness, that relentless pattern recognition that felt like both gift and curse, begins to reveal something deeper than inconsistency. It reveals the universal human struggle to be okay. Everyone is performing. Everyone is protecting. Everyone is constructing a version of themselves they can live with, hiding the parts they fear are unlovable, managing the gap between who they are and who they think they should be. You were never the only one wearing a mask. You were just the only one who could see that everyone else was wearing one too. This awareness doesn't erase your clarity. You still see the facades, still recognize the patterns, still notice what others miss. But now, instead of feeling separate from it, you feel connected through it. Because beneath all the performance, beneath all the carefully constructed presentations, beneath all the social scripts and emotional armor, everyone is just trying to be safe, to be accepted, to be enough, just like you. Your loneliness, you realize, wasn't about being the only one who sees clearly. It was about believing that your clarity made you fundamentally different from everyone else. But you're not different. You're just aware. Aware that we're all performing, all protecting, all hiding the parts we think are too much or not enough, all hoping someone will see through our defenses and love us anyway. The gift isn't that you see through people. The gift is that you can see into them, past their protection to the vulnerability they're guarding, past their performance to the fear driving it, past their contradictions to the wholeness they're struggling to hold together. When perception shifts from judgment to compassion, seeing becomes something else entirely. It becomes witnessing. And in witnessing, without fixing, without exposing, without needing to be right, you finally find a way to be close to people without losing yourself in the distance. Integration doesn't mean you stop seeing clearly. It means you learn to hold what you see with gentleness instead of certainty, with curiosity instead of conclusion, with presence instead of protection. You still notice the inconsistencies. You still recognize the patterns. You still sense the unspoken currents beneath conversation. But now you understand that your perception is one lens among many. Accurate, yes, but not complete. Not the whole truth. Because here's what hyperperceptiveness sometimes misses: context you can't see, history you don't know, pain that predates your presence, the thousand invisible factors shaping why someone shows up the way they do. You might see the performance, but you don't always see what made the performance necessary. So you learn to see with people instead of through them. When someone contradicts themselves, instead of cataloging it as evidence of dishonesty, you recognize it as evidence of complexity. When someone's words don't match their energy, instead of dismissing them as inauthentic, you acknowledge they might be in transition, becoming someone new while still speaking in the language of who they were. You learn the difference between truth-seeking and truth weaponizing. There's a version of clarity that cuts, that uses perception as a blade, exposing people's contradictions to prove your rightness, to maintain your position above the illusion. That's seeing through. But there's another version that connects, that uses perception as a bridge, acknowledging what you notice while holding space for the human struggling beneath it. That's seeing with. You discover when to speak what you observe and when to simply witness it. Sometimes pointing out the pattern helps. Sometimes it's an act of love to say, I notice you say you're fine, but I sense something else is happening. I'm here if you want to talk about it. But sometimes people aren't ready. Sometimes they need the illusion a little longer. Sometimes the kindest thing your perception can offer is patience, allowing someone their process, their timeline, their own journey toward the truth you've already arrived at. You learn to trust that your clarity doesn't obligate you to correct everyone else's. And slowly, the weight begins to shift. The loneliness softens, not because you see less, but because you've stopped demanding that everyone see what you see. You've stopped requiring that your perception be validated by others to be valuable. You allow people their contradictions, their performances, their protective layers. Not because you're naive, not because you've stopped noticing, but because you understand now that seeing clearly doesn't mean standing apart. It means seeing deeply enough to recognize the shared humanity beneath every facade, including your own. You never asked for this. You never wanted to be the person who sees too much, feels too deeply, knows too soon. You never chose to carry the weight of perpetual awareness, to live with pattern recognition that never rests, to stand in the gap between surface and depth. If you could have chosen differently, maybe you would have. Maybe you would have chosen the ease of taking things at face value, the comfort of believing what you're told without cross-referencing it against behavior, the lightness of moving through the world without constantly translating between what's said and what's meant. But you didn't get to choose. This way of seeing chose you, born from necessity, carved by experience, shaped by environments that required you to read the invisible to stay safe. And yet, there is something profound in the depth you carry, something valuable in your ability to witness the unspoken, to sense the hidden, to recognize the patterns others miss, not because it makes you special, but because it makes you capable of a particular kind of presence. You can sit with someone's contradiction without needing to resolve it. You can hold someone's complexity without needing to simplify it. You can see someone's protection without needing to dismantle it. This is rare. In a world that celebrates surface-level connection, that rewards performance over presence, that confuses consistency with authenticity, your ability to see deeper, to hold more, to witness without judgment is a quiet form of medicine. Not for everyone, not all the time, but for those who are ready to be seen, truly seen, beneath their carefully constructed presentations. Your perception becomes permission. Permission to stop performing, to acknowledge the contradiction, to exist in their full complexity without fear of exposure or rejection. You know what it feels like to hide while being visible, to perform while longing for authenticity, to carry truths that have nowhere safe to land. And because you know, you can create space for others to stop hiding too. This doesn't erase the loneliness. It doesn't dissolve the exhaustion. It doesn't make the burden of seeing light or easy, but it transforms it from curse into capacity, from isolation into invitation, from the weight you carry alone into the bridge you build toward those who are ready to be met in their truth. You are not broken for seeing clearly. You are not too much for noticing what others miss. You are not wrong for struggling to find your place in a world that often prefers illusion to honesty. You are awake in a world that often sleeps, and that wakefulness, difficult as it is also the very thing that allows you to recognize others when they open their eyes. If this reflection touched something quiet inside you, something you rarely speak about but carry every day, know that you are not alone in this. The experience of seeing through almost everything, of carrying clarity that feels both like insight and isolation, of longing for connection while your perception builds invisible distance. This is not a flaw in how you're designed. It's a depth that was forged in you, often long before you had language for what you were experiencing. There are others who live in this space, others who calibrate truth and belonging in every interaction, others who feel the weight of perpetual awareness and wonder if there's a place in the world where they can be both honest and connected.
If you'd like to stay connected to this kind of exploration, where we gently examine the hidden corners of the human heart, the psychological patterns that shape us, the emotional truths we carry in silence, you're welcome here. This is a space for depth, for reflection, for the quiet acknowledgement of what's rarely said, but deeply felt. And if something in this video resonated with you, if you'd like to share your own experience of living with this kind of perception, the comment section is yours. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel less alone in their own clarity, not because you have to share, but because sometimes being witnessed in our truth is the first step toward believing it's okay to carry it. You deserve gentleness, especially from yourself. Take care of your beautiful, watchful heart.